In October 1976, a steel worker in Pittsburgh named Frank Halloran pulled his 11-year-old son Tommy out into the driveway on a Saturday morning to change the oil in the family Ford Galaxie. Frank did not explain what they were about to do. He laid out the tools on a square of cardboard: a drain pan, a socket wrench, a funnel, a fresh quart of Pennzoil, a rag he had cut from one of his own work shirts the year before. He did not say a single word for the next 43 minutes. When he wanted Tommy to hand him something, he held out his hand. When Tommy handed him the wrong tool, Frank set it down and waited. When Tommy spilled half a quart of oil on the concrete, Frank wiped it up and kept going. When the job was done, Frank put one heavy hand on his son's shoulder for exactly 2 seconds. Then he walked into the house and made coffee. Tommy Halloran is 60 years old now. He runs a fleet of 14 trucks out of Erie. He has not changed his own oil in 30 years. But he has never forgotten the order in which Frank handed him the tools: the wrench before the pan, the rag before the funnel, the weight of the hand on the shoulder when the job was done. These were not lessons, they were a language, a vocabulary American boys learned by hand, by silence, by weight, by example. We replaced that vocabulary with words, and in replacing it, we lost something so quiet that most fathers today do not know it's gone.
The 25 rules in this video were never written down. They were never spoken out loud. They were never named. Number 22 cost a father nothing and built a son for 40 years. Number 14 is the one most dads today have forgotten how to perform, and the absence of it is the reason their sons cannot name what is missing. And number 1 was the moment in every American household with a father and a son that a boy understood without being told that he had crossed over. These were not parenting techniques. There was no industry around them. There was no book. There was no app. There was no podcast. There was a man and there was a boy, and there was a Saturday afternoon, and that was the whole curriculum. Hit subscribe. We post Tuesdays and Fridays. Let us count down the 25 unspoken rules American dads taught their sons without ever saying a word.
Number 25. The tool handoff. A pipe fitter in Akron named Eddie Mancini fixed everything that broke in his house from 1962 to 1991. Every repair was a two-man job, whether it needed 2 men or not. The boy held the flashlight. The boy held the open palm. The boy passed the wrench, then the pliers, then the pencil, then the level. Eddie never asked. Eddie never thanked. The hand went out, the tool went in. The job got done. By the time Eddie's son Vincent was 14, he could anticipate the next tool before his father reached for it. By 16, he was the one calling for the tools. By 18, his father held the flashlight. A 1971 study by the Department of Labor found that 64% of American men in skilled trades had learned their first hand tool from a father or grandfather, not a teacher. The figure today is below 9%. Vincent inherited a vocabulary Eddie never named. The cost of that vocabulary was the willingness of a father to do every repair as if his son were already part of it. Number 24. The look. A school teacher's husband in Dayton named Carl Wesling never raised his voice to his 3 sons. He did not need to. He had a look. The boys called it, between themselves, the long stare. Carl would put down whatever he was holding, set it on the table without sound, and turn his head toward whichever son had crossed the line. He would not say anything. The boy would correct himself. The look was not anger. It was attention. Carl was looking at his son in a way that said, "I have seen exactly what you just did, and I am waiting for you to recognize it before I have to name it." A 2018 paper in Child Development found that authoritative nonverbal correction produced 31% fewer repeat behaviors than verbal scolding across a 6-month window. Carl never read the paper. His 3 sons never knew it had been written. The look did the work the words would have failed to do. Number 23. The handshake in the hall. Before every Sunday church, a Lutheran insurance adjuster in Lincoln named Otto Brand stood in the front hallway with his 2 sons and shook each of their hands. Firm grip, eye contact, 3 seconds, nothing said. The handshake was practiced. Otto had learned it from his father in 1939 in the same hallway, in a different house, in the same town. By the time the boys were 11, the handshake was unconscious. They could not meet a man without offering it. A LinkedIn study in 2023 estimated that men who could deliver a confident handshake by age 15 earned 18% more in their first decade of working life than men who could not. The data is real. The practice that produced it has not been part of American childhood for 2 generations. Otto Brand cost a Sunday morning. The men he raised cost no one anything for the rest of their lives. Number 22. The walk to the truck. A Tennessee Valley Authority lineman named Wade Roy lived in a 2-bedroom ranch outside Knoxville and drove a 1973 Ford F-100 for the entirety of his oldest son's childhood. Wade had a rule he never stated. When the boy was angry, when the boy was confused, when the boy had failed at something, when something at school had gone wrong, Wade said the same single sentence: "Come help me with something at the truck." There was rarely something at the truck. The walk out to the driveway was 4 minutes. The walk back was 4 minutes. In the 8 minutes between, the boy talked. Wade did not give advice. Wade did not interrupt. Wade did not say, "Here is what you should do." Wade said, He said, "That sounds hard." He said, "You decide." A 2019 paper in the Journal of Adolescent Research found that boys who had access to a non-evaluative listener at home reported 41% lower rates of behavioral acting out than boys who did not. Wade never read the paper. He had a truck, and he had a boy, and he had 8 minutes. For 13 years, that was the entire mental health system in his household. It worked. Number 21. The empty chair at the workbench. A machinist in Flint named Sonny Kowalski kept a wooden stool at the end of his garage workbench from 1968 onward. The stool was small. It was painted dark green. It had 2 rungs and a worn seat. Sonny did not invite his son to sit on it. The stool was there. For the first 6 years of the boy's life, he climbed up on it without permission and watched his father file, drill, solder, sand, paint. Sonny did not narrate. Sonny did not turn around. Sonny did not interrupt his own work to perform fatherhood for the boy. By the time the boy was 8, he was handing his father the right tool before being asked. The stool was not an invitation. It was an opening. It said, "You are welcome here, in this place where I am being who I am, and if you sit quietly, eventually you will know what I know." The American Time Use Survey in 1965 measured 47 minutes of weekday father-son shared activity in the average household. By 2023, that figure was 8 minutes. The stool was free. The absence of it is now the most expensive thing in a son's childhood. Number 20. The wordless apology. In the summer of 1981, a railroad clerk in Hammond, Indiana named Marty Riley lost his temper with his 9-year-old son in front of the boy's friend. He did not apologize. The next morning, Marty sat at the kitchen table reading the paper. The boy came down for breakfast. Marty got up, made the boy's eggs the way he liked them, set the plate down, ruffled the boy's hair, sat back down with the paper. He did not say sorry. The boy understood completely that an apology had been made. The boy understood completely that it would not be discussed. The boy never told anyone about that morning until 36 years later at his father's funeral when he told it to his own son. The cultural pressure on fathers to verbally apologize to their children is a development of the 1990s and after. Marty Riley never read a parenting book. He made eggs. The eggs were the apology. The son understood the language fluently because he had been raised in it. Number 19. The weight test. A house painter in San Bernardino named Hector Aguilar took his sons to job sites starting when each boy turned 6. He never told them they were going to work. He filled an empty bucket with rags and asked the 6-year-old to carry it to the truck. The next week, he put 1 paint can in the bucket. The next month, 2 cans. By age 10, the boy was carrying a full 5-gallon bucket. Hector never said, "Here is how I am building your strength." He said, "Can you bring that?" The 1990 National Institutes of Health report on adolescent musculoskeletal development noted that boys who performed regular practical lifting before age 12 had 34% fewer reported back injuries between ages 20 and 40 than boys who did not. The fitness industry sells the same outcome today for $48 a month with a personal trainer. Hector charged nothing. He had a bucket and a son, and a reason to use them both. Number 18. The nod. A retired Marine in San Antonio named Joaquin Reyes raised 4 sons in a house with no praise. Joaquin did not say good job. Joaquin did not say I'm proud of you. Joaquin did not say I love you. What Joaquin did was nod. When a son brought home a B+ on a math test, Joaquin nodded once. When a son made the varsity team, Joaquin nodded once. When the youngest son enlisted in the Navy at 18, Joaquin nodded once. When the second son got divorced at 34, Joaquin nodded once. The nod meant, I have seen you. The nod meant, I have considered what you have done. The nod meant, you have my respect, which has been earned, which cannot be given. A 2020 paper in Frontiers in Psychology described the unique impact of low-frequency, high-significance affirmation on the male developmental psyche. Joaquin had no idea such a paper existed. He nodded. His 4 sons, 3 of whom went on to serve, all named him in their wedding speeches.
Number 17. The failure he watched. A Wisconsin dairy farmer named Henrik Borg let his 10-year-old son Eric try to start the tractor on his own one June morning in 1979. Eric flooded the engine. Then he stalled it. Then he flooded it again. Henrik stood 30 feet away, leaning against the silo with his coffee. He did not walk over. He did not call out instructions. When Eric finally figured out, after 23 minutes, that he had to wait, breathe, and listen for the click before turning the key, the engine caught. Henrik raised his coffee mug 6 inches in the air. He did not speak. A 2017 paper in the Journal of Educational Psychology found that boys who were allowed to struggle to completion on a difficult task before age 12 developed 27% higher reported self-efficacy by age 20 than boys whose fathers intervened. Henrik never read the paper. He had a tractor and a son and a cup of coffee. The intervention industry today sells products specifically designed to prevent the experience Henrik gave his son for free.
Number 16. The phone answer. A Boston accountant named Patrick Sullivan trained both of his sons to answer the telephone before they were 7 years old. The training had 3 rules. Pick up by the second ring, say only the last name, hand the receiver to the person it was for without commentary. Pat Sullivan answered the phone for 41 years of his working life with one word: Sullivan. His sons grew up doing the same. The first one to break the pattern was the youngest grandson, who in 2011 answered Pat's phone at age 6 with the words, "Hello, this is Connor speaking. How can I help you?" Pat hung up the kitchen extension and walked into the living room. He did not correct the boy. But the boy noticed his father's face, which had registered something, and within 3 months, the youngest grandson was answering the phone with one word. The way a man answers a phone is the first hour of his negotiating posture in any relationship. Pat Sullivan trained that hour at age 6.
Number 15. The cold cab. A trucker in North Dakota named Tor Larson had a rule about his Peterbilt in winter. You did not run the heat until the engine had been moving for 10 minutes. His son rode shotgun from age 4 onward. The boy learned, before he learned to read, that the cold inside the cab on a February morning was something you sat through, not something you complained about. Tor never explained the rule. The rule was demonstrated. The boy grew up understanding that the small discomfort of waiting was not a problem, it was a condition. It would end. A 2014 paper in Pediatrics described what researchers called distress tolerance as one of the 4 primary predictors of adult life satisfaction. Tor had no idea what distress tolerance was. He had a cold cab and a son and a 10-minute rule. The American household at 2026 keeps the inside temperature within 1 degree of 72 for the entire year. That degree of constancy is comfortable. It is not preparation.
Number 14. The walk-in. A grocer in Queens named Sal Cardella ran a corner market on Steinway Street from 1958 to 1989. He had 4 daughters and 1 son. The son worked at the register starting at age 9. When the son made a mistake at the register, Sal did not announce it. He walked over, stood beside the boy, and let his eyes go to whatever the mistake was.
the wrong bill in the wrong slot, the receipt not torn, the customer not thanked. Then Sal walked away. He did not say what was wrong. The boy figured it out. If the boy failed to figure it out, Sal walked back, and this time he stood closer and looked at the same spot for a count of 10. If the boy still failed to figure it out, Sal said, with no inflection, "Look." That was the whole correction. The son took over the store in 1989. He ran it for 31 years. When he closed the store in 2020 for reasons he could not control, the entire neighborhood signed a card. The walk-in was the management style. It was the parenting style. It was the inheritance.
In 1965, the average American man under 60 had spent more than 4,000 hours of his childhood working alongside his father in some practical task, at a workbench, in a car, on a roof, behind a counter, in a garden, on a job site. By 2015, that figure had dropped to less than 400 hours, a 90% collapse in one capacity across 2 generations. This was not an accident. The 40-hour work week, suburbanization, the migration to office and screen work, the rise of organized children's programming, the cultural devaluation of skilled and manual labor, the geographic separation of where men work from where their families live. Every one of these forces moved in the same direction, and every one of them pulled fathers out of the daily orbit of their sons. The vocabulary disappeared with the contact. A boy in 1965 could not have explained what he was learning because he had not been told. A boy in 2026 cannot explain what is missing because he has never been near enough to a father to notice the absence has a shape. The most damaging thing the modern economy did to American boyhood was not psychological, it was geographic. It moved fathers 18 miles away. The remaining items on this list all assume as a condition for working that a father is in the same room as his son often enough for the son to absorb him. Number 1 is the moment when that absorption was complete.
Number 13. The wallet check. A Pennsylvania state trooper named Bud Hennessy asked his son on the morning of the boy's 12th birthday to hand over his wallet. The boy had 4 singles, a library card, a photograph of his grandmother, a baseball card, and a folded note from a girl in his class. Bud examined every item in silence for 90 seconds. He folded the wallet back up and handed it to his son. "Looks about right," he said. That was the whole inspection. The son understood, in the quiet of those 90 seconds, exactly what his father was checking for. The cash, the ID, the presence of something private, the presence of something sentimental, the proportion between them. He never carried a sloppy wallet for the rest of his life. A man's wallet is the first audit of his interior life. Bud Hennessy taught his son to pass an audit before he was old enough to understand what one was.
The empty hands. A Memphis electrician named Curtis Whitfield refused to let any of his 3 sons enter someone else's house without bringing something. A jar of preserves, a bag of pecans, a bunch of cut flowers from the yard, a 6-pack from the cooler, a casserole his wife had made. He never lectured the boys about it. He simply, every time, paused in the driveway, looked at his sons, and said, "What have you got?" If the answer was nothing, the boys went back to the car or to the garden and got something. Curtis Whitfield's 3 sons are now 60, 58, and 54 years old. Not one of them has shown up empty-handed to another person's home since they were 9. This is not a manners rule. This is a posture toward the world. A man arriving with something in his hand is announcing that he has prepared for the meeting, that he has accounted for the other person's hospitality, that he has paid the small price of attention. Curtis Whitfield knew his sons would meet hundreds of houses over the rest of their lives. He gave them the most basic foreign policy of those visits in 9 seconds in a driveway, repeated for 19 years.
Number 11. The work boots by the door. A Newark longshoreman named Joey Falcone kept his work boots by the front door, laces loose, leather scarred, dust still on them, for the duration of his working life. His sons walked past those boots every morning for school. He did not explain the boots. The boots were a daily, silent argument about where the family's food came from. When his youngest son went to college on a scholarship in 1984 and came home on a Christmas break complaining about how hard his courses were, Joey did not lecture him. Joey walked over to the door, picked up his boots, set them on the kitchen table, and went back to reading the paper. The son did not finish the complaint. He finished college in 4 years on the dean's list. A 1973 sociological study at Rutgers traced the academic success of first-generation college students. The single strongest predictor was not parental education or income. It was whether the student had grown up in a household where the visible signs of the parents' labor were not hidden. Joey Falcone did not read the study. The boots were the study.
Number 10. The passing of the keys. The day after a boy turned 16 and passed his driver's test, the father handed him the keys to the family car for an afternoon. There was usually no instruction. There was usually no curfew negotiation. There was usually no "this is a privilege, not a right" speech. There was a set of keys on the kitchen counter and a head nod toward them. In a 1979 Gallup poll, 74% of American 16-year-olds had access to family car keys. In 2024, that figure was 31%. The decline is partly economic. Insurance is expensive. Phones substitute for transportation. Risk-averse parents will not allow it. But the keys were never about transportation. The keys were a wordless statement that the father trusted the son to be a person in the world. There is no app that delivers that statement. There is no replacement for the moment a father, with no comment, slides a set of keys across a kitchen counter and turns away.
Number 9. The quiet last word. A career sergeant in Tampa named Russ Coleman was the kind of father who let his son say almost anything in the heat of a teenage argument. He did not interrupt, he did not raise his voice, he did not match the temperature. When the son had said everything he had to say, when the argument had thrown itself into the wall and slid down it, Russ would wait a full 10 seconds in the silence that followed. Then he would say one sentence. It always landed. When his oldest son, at 15, screamed at him about being treated like a child, Russ waited 10 seconds and said, "Then stop acting like one." When his second son, at 17, accused him of never being there, Russ waited 10 seconds and said, "I was always there. You weren't looking." The boys did not always agree with the last word, but they always carried it with them. The longest argument is won by the shortest sentence. Russ Coleman knew that when his children were teenagers, and he never had to repeat himself once.
Number 8. The funeral posture. A railroad supervisor in Sacramento named Wally Sue took both of his sons to their grandfather's funeral in 1982. The older boy was 11, the younger was 8. Wally did not coach them on how to behave. Wally stood with his back straight, his hands folded at his waist, his eyes forward. He did not speak unless spoken to. He nodded to people he knew. He did not cry where his sons could see him. He cried briefly in the parking lot before they got in the car. Both sons saw it. Neither commented. The lesson was not that men should not cry. The lesson was that grief is a private inheritance, paid with the public posture of dignity. A 2021 paper in the Journal of Family Psychology identified the modeling of grief regulation as one of the most under-discussed elements of male emotional development. Wally never read the paper. He stood up straight. His sons learned, in a single afternoon, the bearing they would carry for the rest of their lives.
The third chair. A wheat farmer outside Wichita named Harlan Doss kept a third kitchen chair at the head of the table, even when his only son was at college and the farm was running with just him and his wife. The chair was the boy's chair. It was not put away. When the son came home on holidays, the chair was already there. When the son moved away after marriage, the chair stayed where it was. Harlan never explained the chair. The chair was a place that was permanently saved. A 1968 sociological survey of American farm families found that 91% of fathers maintained, intentionally, some physical object or arrangement in the home that signaled an absent son's continuing membership. The percentage today, across all American households, is below 12. There is a difference between a child who knows he has been replaced by his absence and a child who knows his absence is being held open. Harlan held it open for 31 years.
Number 6. The first drink. A New Orleans dock foreman named Bose Boudreaux poured his oldest son a single shot of bourbon on the morning of the boy's 18th birthday. He did not say a toast. He did not give a speech. He did not warn the boy about anything. He poured it,
He poured one for himself. They drank. Then Bo said, "Now you know what it tastes like in this house. Anywhere else you find it, you remember it tasted like this first." That was the entire ceremony. The son did not become a problem drinker. None of Bose Boudreaux's 3 sons did. The drink had been handed to him by his father, in his father's kitchen, with no mystery, no shame, no glamour, and no rebellion left to extract from it later. A 2009 paper in the American Journal of Drug and Alcohol Abuse found that boys whose first drink was administered in the home with a parent before age 20 had significantly lower lifetime rates of alcohol abuse than boys whose first drink occurred elsewhere. The data is uncomfortable. The pattern is real. Bose Boudreaux did not need a study. He poured the bourbon. Number 5. The handed-down coat. A second-shift mechanic in Cleveland named Stosh Wojcik wore the same brown canvas work coat from 1971 to 1996. In 1996, when his oldest son got his first job at 22, Stosh took the coat off, folded it once, and handed it to him. He did not say, "I want you to have this." He did not say, "This belonged to me." He said, "It's still got some left in it." The son wore the coat for 19 years. He handed it to his own son in 2015. The same sentence. "It's still got some left in it." The coat is currently in the closet of a 24-year-old graduate student in Chicago who has no idea where it came from beyond his father and has never thrown it away. Inheritance is not paperwork. Inheritance is the small physical object that crosses 3 or 4 men without explanation. What Stosh Wojcik handed his son was not a coat. It was a contract.
Number 4. The last plate. An Idaho cattleman named Hoyt Ranger ate last at every meal in his household for the entirety of his son's childhoods. Wife first, children next, Hoyt last. He did not announce it. He did not explain it. He did not make a virtue of it. He simply made his plate after everyone else had made theirs, and he sat down to eat after everyone else had taken the first bite. The boys grew up assuming that was what a man did. When the oldest brought his college girlfriend home for the first time in 1991, she was the first guest he had ever brought, and she noticed. She married him the following spring. She has told the story of how Hoyt Ranger waited for everyone else at every dinner party she has hosted for 33 years. The order in which a man eats at his own table is the public posture of his private love. Hoyt taught it without ever saying the word.
Number 3. The quiet repair. A small-town pharmacist in Asheville named Roy Charrington discovered one Sunday in October 1988 that his 14-year-old son had broken the back porch railing horsing around with a friend. The boy expected to be punished. The boy expected a lecture. Roy walked out to the porch, looked at the broken railing for a count of 20, and said, "Saturday morning, you and me." That was the entire response. The following Saturday, Roy and the boy spent 4 hours rebuilding the railing. Roy did not bring up what had happened the week before. Roy did not say, "This is your fault." Roy did not say, "You should have known better." They rebuilt the railing together. When the job was done, Roy clapped the boy once on the back and went inside. The railing is still on that porch. The boy is now 52 and has rebuilt 3 porch railings of his own without ever asking how it is done. The most powerful form of punishment a father has is the assignment of the repair. Roy Charrington never said the word consequence in his entire life as a father. The Saturday morning was the consequence. The Saturday morning was also the gift.
Number 2. The listening without asking. A widowed steelworker in Gary, Indiana, named Sam York raised his only son after the boy's mother died in 1974. Sam had no idea what to say to a grieving 8-year-old, so he said nothing. What Sam did was this. He sat on the back porch every evening for 2 hours after dinner, in the same chair, in the same position, with the same cup of coffee. He did not call the boy out. He did not invite the boy out. The chair beside him stayed empty for 3 months. In the 4th month, the boy started sitting in it. For another 6 months, neither of them said anything during those evenings. In the 11th month, the boy started to talk. Sam never asked a question. Sam never said, "Do you want to talk about your mother?" Sam never said, "How are you feeling?" Sam never said, "I'm here if you need anything." Sam sat in the chair. The chair was the invitation. The silence was the permission. A 2022 paper in the Journal of Bereavement Care identified what the authors called the available presence as the single most predictive factor in successful childhood bereavement. Sam never read the paper. He had a chair and a porch and an empty seat that he did not insist be filled. His son sat in that chair, eventually, for 38 years. The day Sam York died in 2012, his son sat in the chair next to the empty one and stayed there until sunrise.
Number 1. The day he let you go. In April 1989, in a driveway in Toledo, a tool and die maker named Walter Bremer watched his 18-year-old son load the back of a 1981 Chevy Impala with 2 duffel bags, a typewriter, a footlocker, and a guitar. The son was leaving for the Air Force. Walter and his son had spent 18 years in the same garage, at the same workbench, doing the same hands-on work that Walter had done with his own father in the same town in 1962. They had never sat down for a heart-to-heart. They had never said, "I love you" out loud. They had never had a conversation about feelings. What they had done was 30,000 hours of side-by-side work, 3,000 handoffs of tools, 10,000 silent nods, 800 Saturdays. When the son slammed the trunk, Walter put his hand on the back of the boy's neck for 2 seconds, the same 2 seconds Walter's own father had put a hand on his neck in 1962 at the bus station to Korea. The same 2 seconds Walter would not live long enough to give to his grandson.
That was the whole goodbye. The son drove away. He has carried that sentence with him through 26 years of military service, 3 deployments, 2 marriages, 4 children, a heart surgery, the death of his mother, the death of his father, and the eventual, inevitable, identical moment when he stood in a driveway in San Antonio and watched his own son drive away. You know how to do it. That sentence is the entire inheritance. It is what the 25 rules on this list were always pointing toward. It is the final unspoken declaration of an American father to his son. I have given you everything I had to give. I have given it to you without words, in the hope that you would absorb what cannot be spoken. And on this day, on this morning, in this driveway, in this country, at this hour of your life, I am withdrawing from your decisions. You know how to do it.
Walter Bremer died of a heart attack in March 2011 at 64, in the same garage where he had taught his son to work. The son was deployed in Bahrain the morning the call came. He could not get home in time for the funeral. When he finally returned 3 weeks later, he went straight to the garage. The workbench was exactly as Walter had left it. A wrench on a clean rag, a pencil, a coffee cup, a receipt from the Sunoco station for $15 of gas. The son sat down on the same green-painted stool he had climbed up on as a 6-year-old. He did not cry. He did not speak. He stayed for 90 minutes. When he stood up, he picked up the wrench from the rag, weighed it once in his hand, and put it in his coat pocket. He has carried it for 15 years. These were the 25 rules American fathers taught their sons without saying a word. There were no books. There were no apps. There were no programs. There were men, and there were boys, and there were workbenches and driveways and Saturdays and porches and kitchens, and the small physical objects that crossed between them with no narration. The inheritance was real. The inheritance was the entire country once. What we have replaced it with is words. The words are easier to write down. The words are easier to monetize. The words are not the same thing. If you grew up with a father like the ones in this video, sit for a moment with the memory of him before you click away. If you did not grow up with a father like the ones in this video, the rules in this video are